How to knit an afterthought heel. Hi everyone, Norman here. In today's video I want to show you the ingenious afterthought heel method where you cut open a finished sock cube to insert a heel that does not require any short rows or picking up stitches from an edge. I'm going to show you two easy versions with a big focus on creating a well-rounded heel without any ears here at the tip, and of course tips to prevent big holes here around the gap. Let's dive right into it. Just one note here, you can find the written instructions and the full pattern on my blog. It's the first link in the description below. Okay, so let's show you the easiest way to insert an afterthought heel first. So I knitted my cuff, I knitted all the rows for my cuff, and if I was to knit a, say, German short row heel, a heel flap and gusset heel, or whatever else, this would be the point where I would start working on the heel. And this is precisely the spot where I want you to stop for the afterthought heel as well. The afterthought heel is worked across half of your stitches, so I have 52 stitches here in my round, and I'm going to work it across 26 stitches. I'm going to work it across these 26 stitches, and I already counted them. Now, before you start working on the afterthought heel or the preparation for the afterthought heel, I want you to take a critical look at your work in progress, because right now this is just one symmetrical cube. However, you may see that here I ended up with, well, some slight jogs here where I changed colors. This is, I mean, you know, I tried my best, but a lot of it will disappear after blocking, but it will still be faintly visible. So it would be kind of, well, not the best idea if I placed my heel here across this half of my work, because then this jog here would end up right at the top of my instep. Probably not a good idea. So instead I will place my heel right across these needles here. So here, this jog here will end up on the inside of my calf where it's least noticeable. In the first step, you can opt to place a lifeline. This is a step recommended for beginners. If you're an experienced knitter, I would entirely skip that. So I have a blunt tapestry needle here, and I thread a bit of fishing line on it. You can also use dental floss. And then I'm going to pull, with the help of my tapestry needle, I'm going to pull that bit of fishing line here through all the stitches I want to work my heel across. So in my case, that's 26 stitches. Can be a little bit fiddly. Now, if you are an experienced knitter, I would say you can entirely skip this step. This is just a little safety measure for beginners. Okay, so I secured all stitches with my optional lifeline here, and now I'm going to pick a bit of scrap yarn in a contrasting color, and I'm going to knit across my heel stitches here. You don't need a special joining method or anything. We are going to remove this later on anyway, so you can simply knit across all those stitches. So no special joining technique, just knit across. So here I am. I've knitted across all my heel stitches, and now you can already break the yarn. Again, leave a short little tail here on this side. And that is already the full preparation for our afterthought heel. Okay, so we've knitted across this one row, and then you simply pick up your working yarn again, because it's still attached here to the side. I didn't cut it, and neither did I tell you to cut it. And then you can just knit across as if nothing happened. If you're using circular knitting needles, you may need to shuffle around stitches a little bit, or your knitting needle, but here with double pointed knitting needles, it's super easy. You can just knit across as if nothing happened. Be careful here for this very first stitch so it doesn't end up way too loose. So pull tight here after the second stitch. This is important. Pull tight, otherwise you will end up with a huge gap here. That's not what you want. And then you just knit across. This is, by the way, also a very nice technique to knit buttonholes, or actually a color work technique as well. If you just want small little single stripes and want to use up some scraps. But here we are going to use it as a way to knit our afterthought heel. Okay, so and here on the other side, be careful, these last stitches are bound to be rather loose, so tighten up, and then you can continue knitting. Again, as you bridge this gap here, make sure that you tighten up after the second stitch. You don't want to have too much slack here for this gap. And then you can finish knitting this round. So after this round, for those of you who placed a lifeline here in this row below, now would be the time to place another lifeline here at above. So here for this round as well, you need, well, you can opt to place another lifeline here for this row as well. So with my two, well, almost invisible lifelines here in place, you can simply continue knitting. So as I just said, you simply continue knitting as if, and according to your pattern, as if nothing has happened. All you did here was insert two lifelines here, so it's easier to pick up the stitches later on and knit this one row, or rather half row, using scrap yarn. So from here it's easy sailing, and I guess this is the reason why so many people actually like the Afterthought heel. It makes sock knitting a breeze, because all you do is you only knit one big tube and that's it. So I knitted across a couple of more rows to show you the results. So we have this one little row or half row in the contrasting yarn, and the rest is just my regular pattern. I already removed the lifeline because I find them very annoying and they actually don't help me, but as I said, a lot of knitters enjoy them, so that's why I showed it to you, just in case you want to make use of them. So I pulled out my fountain pen, and loyal subscribers will know this means we need to do some simple and easy calculations. Because after all, you will probably go, well, Norman, inserting this one row was nice and easy, but when do I start working the toe? Well, that's super easy to find out. Let me show you how. In the first step, I want you to create an outline of your foot. So just step on a piece of paper and use a Sharpie or a pencil or a pen and go all the way around. Next, we need to do a very simple calculation. It might make a little bit more sense once you've knitted an Afterthought heel yourself, but for now, simply follow these steps. So the Afterthought heel is worked across half of your stitches. However, we will pick up stitches from both sides of the gap and then knit in the round. So this means you can actually work with your cast on as the base of your calculations. In my case, that's 52 stitches. Now we will decrease the Afterthought heel in a kind of wedge shape, and we will leave some stitches here in the middle for a nicer fit. and we are going to leave 8 stitches on either side. So that's times 2, that's 16 stitches. This number will be the same no matter how many stitches you cast on. If you have like, I don't know, 80 stitches or so, maybe leave 10, but for most applications 8 stitches is okay. So 52 stitches minus twice that number, minus 16 stitches. Those are the stitches we won't decrease. So that's 36 stitches. As we work our afterthought heel, we will decrease, or I will decrease 36 stitches. Now, you will decrease by 4 stitches in every decrease round. So that's 36 stitches divided by 4. That's 9. That is how many decrease rows you will have. Since we're not decreasing in every row, but in every second row, you need to multiply this times 2. So 9 rows times 2, that's 18 rows. 18 rows. That is how many rows my afterthought heel will have. So 18 rows. And the rest is super simple. So take out your work in progress and count 18 rows. So I know this stripe has 5 stitches. I know this stripe has 10 stitches. So that's already 15. 1, 2, 3. So here, from here to here, those are my 18 rows. And now simply measure them. Now do stretch out your fabric a little bit, because you will stretch it out as well as you wear things. And then measure things. So I'm measuring in centimeters here. So that is around 5.4 centimeters. But if you work with inches, the calculations will be the exact same thing. 5.4 centimeters. Next, you take your outline and mark that very spot. So here, 5.4 centimeters. That's where I want you to draw a little line, because this is how big your heel will be. Then you also need to mark the spot where you want to start knitting your toes. So I always start knitting the toes here, right in the middle of my pinky toe. That's the spot where my foot is getting narrower. If you use a different spot, then mark that spot. It really depends a little bit on what kind of toe you are knitting and what you prefer. And the rest couldn't be easy. You just align your little scrap yarn row here with this line. Stretch things out a little bit, and then you continue knitting until your work in progress hits this line, and then you start decreasing for your toes. So just to be sure, that's how far I knitted before I started with the toes. So as you can see, I finished knitting my toe box, and now it's time to pick up stitches for our afterthought heel. You can do this using the exact same knitting needles you've been using all along. However, if you have some spares, it's actually a little bit easier to do it with smaller knitting needles. Up to you. But smaller knitting needles will be easier. So this here is our little scrap yarn, and no matter if you actually placed a lifeline here or if you didn't, the next step is actually always the same. Now you could, if you have the lifeline in, you could unravel this bit first and then pick up stitches as you go. However, I still wouldn't recommend doing this. Instead, here's what you need to do. So see here, this here is one V of a knit stitch. Here's a V, here's a V. So it's a row of V's below that orange line. And I want you to pick up always the right leg, here, this right leg, of every single stitch in that row. See what I'm doing here? Just pick up the right legs. Try to stay clear of the orange yarn. Don't accidentally split it. And that is basically why I said placing a lifeline here is probably just not needed, and actually makes everything a little bit more complicated. The only reason why you might want to place it is if you are scared that this bit here unravels. So with the lifeline, things are secure. Once you picked up all these stitches, you can do the exact same thing here on the other side. So turn your work around and then pick up always the right leg of all these stitches below the half row in the contrasting yarn and work all the way across. And now comes the only, well, slightly scary bit. You need to unravel that orange row. So pick up a spare needle, tapestry needle, whatever, and pull it out. Now you can see my tail is rather long here, and if you pull if you pull all that tail through every stitch, it's just going to grind down the stitches. So what you can definitely always do is you can cut away the tail so it's faster and a little bit easier on the individual stitches. And see, nothing is gonna happen. These stitches here are all secure, so don't worry. It feels scary, this kind of, well, operation, I guess, but it isn't. Work all the way across and always remember, keep this little tail short. Don't pull too much yarn to these stitches. And there we go, we are done. And now we can start working on the Afterthought heel. Now that everything is prepared, it's time to knit the actual Afterthought heel. So pick up the yarn you want to knit your heel with. And of course, if you use smaller knitting needles to pick up the stitches, remember to switch to the actual size. Here there is going to be a gap. And it's best to fill this because otherwise, well, it's not going to pretty. So we will start with an increase. The other thing you might want to do, so leave a sizable tail. You can use this to sew over any potential gap later on to fill it even further. So we are going to start with an increase, with a lifted increase. So see this row here, this stitch here, one row below. I'm going to lift this back to the knitting needle and do a KRL, knit right loop into that first stitch. And then I'm just going to knit across this row here. Since I want to knit in the round, you probably should join in another needle here in the middle. If you're doing this with circulars and the magic loop technique, of course you don't have to. And just in case, I'm going to show you how to do this, or in the second part of this video with circular knitting needles, I had to start with one technique. And here over on this side, you need to do a very similar thing. So knit the last stitch, and then here, this stitch one row below, lift it back to your knitting needle and also place an increase. Then other side, turn to the other side. And now you need to do a very similar thing. Here, this stitch here, this loop here, see this loop, lift it back, knit into it, and then continue knitting. Make sure to tighten up a little bit after the gap so you don't end up any unnecessary slack to the whole contraction. And then continue knitting across the second half here as well. And here one last time, you also need to find the stitch here over on this side. So let me, okay, so here this is the gap, and you need to go into the stitch one row below here, this gap, and also knit another increase to close the gap. Okay, so that was the first round. Now we can continue knitting across for 2 more rounds. So here, make sure that you tighten up this stitch a little bit. Don't weave it in as you go. We can still use this to do some magic later on. But for now, you start the Afterthought heel with 3 plain rows of knitting. You could even do more than that. You could even do more than 3 rows, 4 or 5. Some might even add in increases for a roomier heel. But for now, we're just going to start with the standard instructions. And this is my third round. Again, just knit across. Just 3 rows of plain knitting here, nothing special or spectacular. Now I want to actually keep up my stripe pattern here for the heel. So here on the other side of the gap, so this here over on this side I joined in the white yarn to get started, and here on the other side of the gap I am going to switch colors. That's nothing you need to do, that's entirely optional, but I am actually going to switch colors. That way I can actually keep up my stripes, and secondly I will also end up with another tail I can use to close any remaining gap I might end up later. So I am going to join in another color here, or my old color, using, now this is complicated really, I'm using the twist and weave method here. I have a full tutorial for this method because it sure is a little bit complicated the first time you see it, but it creates a very, very stable join. Again, resist the urge to weave in this tail, because you weave in as you go, that's what I mean, because we could really need it later on to fix things. Okay, so round 4 is where things finally get interesting. I placed a little stitch marker here to mark the beginning of my round so I don't accidentally mess up the repeat in the following rounds. So here on this side we want to create a nice heel. So on this side we want a left, on the right side we want a left leaning decrease, because we need that heel. So if you look at your heel, you need a heel like this. So on the right side you need a left leaning decrease, and on the left side a right leaning decrease. So because you want a heel that looks like this, so here on this side we need left leaning. So just in case you forget, you can always look at your knitting, and then it's quite easy to determine. So you knit 1 stitch and then we do a left leaning decrease. I do an SSK here, you do your favorite, a left leaning increase. I am actually personally very satisfied with SSK, and as you saw, I kind of yanked on the yarn to improve it even a little bit further. But if you prefer slip purlwise, slip knitwise, slip purlwise, and then knit them together through the back loop, then do this. Here on this side, 3 stitches before the edge, you do a knit 2 together. Here on this side, we want a right leaning decrease, and then knit that last stitch. Turn around. You may consider placing another stitch marker over on this side here. So I'm using a different color and only 1 clippy marker, so I know, okay, this is a place where I need to decrease, but it's not the beginning of my round. And then over on this side you repeat, you lead with SSK, SSK, yank it, carry over to the other stitches, And then here, 3 stitches before the end of the row, you place another knit 2 together. Make sure that you don't split the yarn. Knit 2 together. And then you do 1 intermission round. So 1 row of plain knitting. Now, personally, I always knit my SSKs through the back loop in the next round. I feel that looks a lot neater. It's an option, you don't need to do that, but I always do that. The knit 2 togethers can stay the way they are. So here I'm just knitting across that side, but the SSKs, so here over on this side, the knit 2 togethers, they can stay the way they are. They are usually quite neat as they are. But here over on this side, there is another SSK here. So I'm going to knit that through the back loop. So these are my last 2 stitches of the second round. And in the third round, you repeat the first round all over again. So knit 1 stitch, then SSK, yank, carry over, and knit until you are 3 stitches before the next stitch marker over here. Here 3 stitches before this stitch marker. There's a knit 2 together. Then switch over to the other side. Knit 1, SSK, yank, carry over, and continue. And then here over on this side, 3 stitches before the end of your round, you place another knit 2 together. And you repeat these 2 rounds, or rather you decrease in every second round in this manner until there are, well, 7 stitches left on each needle, or if you're doing circular knitting needles, then 14 on each side. So I made some good progress here in the past, well, 15 to 20 minutes, and my afterthought heel is slowly taking shape. You can clearly see the kind of wedge shape it creates. So here, this is the view from the sides for now. And now I only have 7 stitches here left on either needle, or that's 14 stitches here in the back and 14 stitches here in front. And now you can continue decreasing, but this from here you will decrease in every round until you have only 4 or 8 stitches left on the front side and on the back side, or in my case that's 4 stitches per needle. So still with SSK here on this side and knit 2 together here on this side, the same here. SSK here, knit 2 together here, and you can clearly see the kind of slanting line this has been creating here on both sides. So now there are only 16 stitches left here in this tiny little gap here at the top, and we need to close this with a Kitchener stitch. So in the first step, just transfer all the needles the stitches here in front to one needle, and the same here on the back side. Transfer all these stitches to one needle like so. Then we can break the yarn and leave a sizable tail. Well, doesn't need to be all that big, but say 30 centimeters or, well, 12, 13 inches. Then pick up a blunt tapestry needle, thread the tail on the blunt tapestry needle, and we are ready to start the Kitchener stitch together. The Kitchener stitch usually starts with 2 preparation stitches. In this case, we are going to skip them. So we start by, so my tail is here coming or out of the stitch here on the back needle. So we are going to drop this stitch here, this front stitch knitwise, and then go into the adjacent stitch purlwise. Keep the yarn here below and tighten up. Then on the back needle, you always do things exactly the other way around. Drop the stitch purlwise and go into the adjacent stitch knitwise. Again, make sure that the yarn here stays below and tighten up. And from here it's rinse and repeat. Drop knitwise, go into the adjacent stitch purlwise, tighten up. Drop purlwise and go into the adjacent stitch knitwise. Always make sure that the yarn here stays below and doesn't, catch anything. So I actually feel that the Kitchener stitch is super easy, because all you need to remember is that you need to drop the first stitch knitwise, and from there it's everything is exactly the other way around. So in the next, so you drop the first stitch knitwise and go into the next stitch purlwise, and then on the back side you do things the other way around yet again. So you drop purlwise instead of knitwise and you go into the next stitch purlwise. Very simple. Another way to remember this: here you want to graft a knit stitch, that's why you do it knitwise. And here you are working the wrong side or from the wrong side, and that's the purl stitch is a mirrored knit stitch, so that's why you drop purlwise. That's what helps me. I just take a look, what do I want to graft? I want to graft a knit stitch, that's why I drop knitwise. So slowly coming here towards the end. I'm showing everything here because maybe some of you want to graft along, and I know a lot of people find the Kitchener stitch a little bit, well, difficult to remember, bothersome, both. I don't. I actually rather like it, but that's only me. Okay, well, last stitches are always a little bit difficult because the needles are running around. Here and here at the very end, we do exactly the same. Normally we would have to do one more stitch here, and we don't. Instead, I just pull tight. And then, watch closely. Watch very closely here. So here, this is my Kitchener stitch, and here below, see there is, let's get this out of the way. So these are my last 2 stitches here, and basically what I did here is just a decrease. And right here below, there is a little hole, and I pull the tapestry needle here through that hole, right through that hole. And let's show you what this does. This pulls the little ear here on the other side in as well. Can you see this? This pulls in the ear, sorry. And then the result will hopefully be a well-rounded, considerably well-rounded edge here. If you notice, there are still some loose stitches here, you can carry any excess over to this side and then pull on the tail, and there you go. And then of course we also need to weave in the tail here, and I always do it like this. So I take a sharp tapestry needle and then I pierce right through those purl ridges here, pull things through, and then do the same thing into the other direction. Just one little purl ridge to the side, pull things through, let things ease up, and then there you go. Then I want you to turn things inside out again and take a close look at this area here. So we placed increases here to avoid a gap, but still an increase is always pulling one stitch into two directions. So there's bound to be a little hole here. You can try to fix it by carrying the excess here over to the side. Distribute all that slack evenly here among the adjacent stitches. There you go. And you will be able to close tiny gaps here in a way that they won't be noticeable. If it's like a really big gap here, you can, there's still the tail here on the inside. Sorry. Here on the inside, there is still this tail here. You can bring that tail to the front and then add 2-3 well-placed duplicate stitches here to cover this area. I am quite satisfied with the way this looks here, so I'm not going to do this. But if you feel, okay, my gap is a little bit too big, then just cover things up with 1 or 2 well-placed duplicate stitches before you weave things in on the wrong side. And just to show you what I mean, so often it's enough so to just do 1 row of duplicate stitches here, so across this little row. So just go above and below, and follow the natural course of these knit stitches. So it's just duplicate stitch what I'm doing here, and basically I reinforced this row here only, this row only here, and you could do the exact same thing in the other direction here and in this direction as well. Because as I said, for these increased stitches, there's always, there's one stitch pulling the stitch below in this direction and in this direction, and this is bound to lead to little gaps. There is no way to avoid this, but if you reinforce that section a little bit with duplicate stitches, it's going to be almost invisible later on. Anyway, there you have it. Here is the finished Afterthought heel. As you can see, this heel type has the unique advantage of being able to continue the stripe pattern in this direction. This can be fabulous for a self-striping yarn or any more adventurous colorway. Now I am going to block this sock here to get rid of any remaining imbalances, and while it's on the blocking board, I'm going to show you the alternative way to knit an Afterthought heel. So in the beginning of this video, I promised you a second part where I knit an Afterthought heel using circular knitting needles. Now personally, I have to tell you that any sock pattern can be knitted with double pointed knitting needles or circulars, and just because it says circulars, that doesn't mean you cannot knit double pointed knitting needles and vice versa. The pattern will always stay the same. So the reason why I'm showing you a second version has nothing to do with circulars. It has to do with the fact that in the first version we inserted this 1 row in a contrasting yarn, So, as Elizabeth Zimmerman would have coined it, this heel requires forethought and not afterthought. So we had to plan ahead to insert this line to then be able to knit it. So it's not a true afterthought heel. So I prepared this second, sock shaft to show you how to insert a true afterthought heel where you don't need to plan ahead. Okay, so I've knitted my cuff here, then continued with this long tube of stripes and then finished with my toes here. And the most important question is, of course, now where exactly will we have to insert the afterthought heel so it fits? To answer this question, we are back here to the little outline of my foot. So remember the calculations for our heel. We placed a little line there, and you need to do exactly the same calculation and then measure those rows you need and mark that spot here for your outline. And then you can simply overlay things and then place a little stitch marker right where that line, or in my case arrow, is. Of course I cheated a little bit. I knew from the previous sock where I could place the heel so my stripes perfectly align, but for you it probably doesn't. That's why stripes and patterns like that are typically not the ideal pattern for a true afterthought heel. Okay, and the rest is super simple and actually remarkably similar. So actually it's more or less the same. So we don't have a contrasting yarn here, we don't have any lifelines here, but we can pick up stitches nevertheless. So here is where I placed my stitch marker, and we will pick up stitches one row below and one row above. So this here is the row where the row where we need to insert the lifeline, the afterthought hole. So I'm going to pick up stitches one row below using my circular knitting needles here, and I'm always picking up the right leg of these stitches. Go slowly that you don't accidentally skip one row or so. Go slowly because now you don't have any row in a contrasting color to guide you. And just like before, you need to knit the afterthought heel, or this true afterthought heel, across half of your stitches. So I cast on 52 stitches, so I need to see one row below here, so I need to pick up 26 stitches. And then once you picked up the required number of stitches, you can pull your circular needle through, turn your project around, and pick up stitches from the other side. So here, this is the last stitch. See, this is the last stitch that I've picked up. I skip this row, and then the first stitch I'm going to pick up is this one. So just follow that line and pick up the right leg of these V's here. The right leg of that V's, and keep that one row in between all the way across. And here are the last 3 stitches over on this side. Again, follow that line, and this is the last stitch you need to pick up. Quickly check that you didn't accidentally split the yarn and also picked up this strands from the row here in the middle. And then you can remove your stitch marker, and we can start the next step. So now comes the probably scariest bit of knitting an afterthought heel. We need to unravel this bit here and cut your work in progress, your precious sock, open. To do this, find the stitch that is here, or find a stitch that is in the center. If it's, if you're off one stitch or so, it doesn't really matter. And pull it out a little bit. And then pick up your scissors make sure that it is exactly the stitch in the middle and cut through. There we go. And then you can use a knitting needle and carefully unravel this one stitch at a time. We need this strand here, and I think I split the yarn here, or no, it's just, you need to carefully unravel this to either side, and we need this bit here because we need to weave in that end later on. And I'm gonna check what I did here. Yeah, like so. So my yarn here is kind of fuzzy, so it catches very easily, like so. So work all the way to this side, and then do the exact same thing here over to this side, and see if you picked up the stitches correctly. They are secure just like before, and your work really cannot unravel. Okay, so this is the result. Now there is a very important difference we need to talk about. So when we inserted the scrap yarn, there was no in-between round, but now here to the side there is this, I don't know, here, this round here, there's this, well, the round we skipped when we picked up, but it also means we need to bridge this round as we close things in the round. And this can be a bit tricky and prone to creating holes. So combine that with the fact that we are using circulars and the magic loop technique now. This just risks creating gaps here. So in the very first step, I want you to shuffle around stitches in a way. I mean, we don't have a beginning of the round here, but I want you to shuffle stitches around in a way that the gaps are actually here along the middle and not here aligned with the gaps, because you know that just spells disaster. And on top of that, it's a little bit more difficult to see the stitches. So I want you to shuffle around stitches, so the stitches are, or the gaps are here in the center. Okay, so once you shuffled around stitches, this will be the result, and it will give you a good impression how big these gaps actually are. So if you just insert the lifted increases the way I showed you before, you are bound to end up with gaps, even though you can use these tails to sew things over. But still, let's do things properly, and especially considering now there is no further stress added to these gaps, so the results will be quite a little bit better regardless. Okay, so next, pick up the yarn you want to knit your heel with, and of course the correct size knitting needles, and then start on either end. It doesn't matter, it's a circular object, it doesn't matter, and then just start knitting. You can weave that tail here in as you go right away, so you don't need to do it later on. I mean, this is just an option, but you know, a lot of people think weaving in ends is quite annoying, so do it right away here so you can skip it. With the first method, I told you to not weave them in as you go because you need those tails, but here we actually have some tails we can use and need to use, because otherwise this would unravel further, which is of course not what you want. Okay, this stitch is a little, need to correct this stitch here. There we go, I think I have it, yes, there you go. Sometimes happens when you split the stitch a little bit while picking up. Just making sure that you weave in the right tail here, and then we can continue knitting until we come to the gap. And here at the gap we need to increase or pick up 2 stitches, and this is going to be slightly difficult. So the tail here is still attached to this stitch here, and that is the missing row. And this stitch here has 2 bars on either side. So here's one and here's one. And these 2 bars, these bars here, we are going to lift them back to the knitting needle, like so, and knit into them. So that was the first one. Now you need to go hunting for the second one. This might be a little bit more on the tricky side. Here's the second one, and knit into that stitch as well. Tighten up, and then you can continue knitting, and this will, as you can see, bridge this gap here quite beautifully. And of course then you can continue knitting across. Okay, and over here on this side you need to do the exact same thing. You need to find the missing row. So I pull here on my tail, and it tells me here. These are the 2 strands I need to lift back. I did a jogless join here, so that's why things look a little bit different over here on this side. So lift these strands back here and continue knitting. Take a look at the result right away. If you feel, okay, this is still a little bit too, well, there are still holes here, you could also pick up 4 stitches, but remember, you can always use the tail to fix things later on, and most likely, well, and you can see this, these adjacent stitches here stole yarn, this big hole here stole yarn from the adjacent stitches, and you will be able to redistribute this later on. So for now I'm going to knit things like this. Now after this one row with the pickup stitches, consider placing stitch markers here right at the gap. You can even do that before. Now I never knit with stitch markers, that's why I don't do it. But consider placing a stitch marker here on either side of the gap. Where is it? Here. Of either side, on either side of the gap. So you know exactly where you need to decrease later on. But just like before, consider knitting across 2 more rows without any decreases. You could even do 4 for a roomia here, or 5. Some people even like to place increases here in this first round. They will actually add some increases to achieve a yet roomier heel. So that's up to you. But I'm going to stick to the very same pattern as before. So I'm going to knit altogether 3 rounds without decreases, and then I'm going to decrease with knit 2 together before the stitch marker and SSK after the stitch marker, just the way we did before. And then 1 intermission round, and then another decrease round, until there are 14 stitches left on either side, and then you can decrease in every row until there are only 16 stitches left, and then you finish with a Kitchener stitch. So the rest of the pattern here remains exactly the same. The only difference is the way you cut open everything. So the preparation is different, and the fact that you need to handle these gaps a little bit differently. So just to make sure I get the idea across, and no one complains, Norman, I don't really know what this means, what, where, what, how. So here I am in my 4th round. I just switch colors because, yeah, I want to continue these stripes, but of course that's nothing you need to do. Then 3 stitches here before the gap. So here I place my stitch marker right at the gap. you knit 2 together, then just like before, you keep 2 stitches in between. It's just not right at the gap anymore. And then here after the gap, you do a knit 2 together, and the exact same repeat over on the other side. Knit 2 together, 3 stitches before the gap, then knit 2 and SSK. So it's the exact same pattern, as I said, only the way you knit those 2, you prepare the afterthought heel. That's the difference. So here over on this side, just like I said, 3 stitches before the gap or the stitch marker if you placed one, you knit 2 together, knit 2, and then do an SSK. And then there's going to be 1 intermission round, and then you decrease again until there are only 14 stitches left on either side. Anyway, I'm going to finish this afterthought heel on this side, and then I'll show you how I, well, fix the little gap that's still there. So let's take a look at the result. So I think it looks fairly good here. Of course, you can tell that here you needed to bridge that gap, and it's a little bit more noticeable than here our earlier version, which is a little bit less conspicuous. Here on this side, and it's kind of hard to predict this in my experience, here on this side I ended up with a hole. Now, technically speaking, there is no hole. I could try to tighten things up and move the slack over to the side. However, what you would quickly note, or you would quickly notice, that this hole here will ease right back. And the reason behind that is, again, there are forces pulling on this hole in this direction and in this direction, and that's why it appears. So we need to bring the yarn forward and fix it. However, I want you to show that you can also do it here on the wrong side. So as you can see, a purl stitch goes always up and down, and you can also do duplicate stitches here on the wrong side and reinforce this hole here on either side. Here, that stitch goes all the way around, and then you need to, well, be a little bit creative. So we are going to, because this stitch doesn't actually have an anchor, so we are going to use the next stitch here. My tail is a little bit frayed here, and already that hole is a little bit closer. And then we're going to add a little bit of creative license here. Go here around, and then reinforce the hole into the other direction as well. Now there is this little lump here, so going to, so you always want to go through the purl bumps, and then I'm going to pull tight and follow in that direction, and already our hole is closed. You can weave it in, but let's take a look at the right side here. So see, get this out. So see, this here is much better now already. See, this is much better. And here at the top, here these details you can redistribute. That's typically possible. So once the big hole is closed, you can fix the rest quite easily. And there you go. I think it looks quite nice. Okay, so my socks here are blocked and fully dry, and this is the result. I would say it's pretty neat. Of course, this second version where we had to bridge this additional row is a little bit more noticeable. That's bound to happen. Also, of course, I knitted these socks with 6-ply yarn and pretty big needles to ensure that you can see the details a little better on camera. Normally, you would probably knit socks with 4-ply yarn and smaller knitting needles, and then this transition would be not as noticeable. Personally, I feel that this second version truly shines when you need to make knitting. So here is a sock a friend of mine destroyed while on a hike, and you can literally see that he ripped open the whole heel. This is a heel flap and gusset heel, but that does not matter. You can simply insert one knitting needle here at the end of the heel flap and another at the end of where you turned around. Then things will look like this, like so. And then you knit an Afterthought heel across, maybe with fewer rows or so, because you do not need as much depth. But still, you can easily use this to fix even such a heavily destroyed sock heel. Some say that the Afterthought heel is also great when you don't know the exact shoe size and it's a surprise gift. Then you can finish the sock as a cube, gift it, and then when they know they are receiving some socks, they will of course tell you their shoe size, and then you can do the calculations and insert the heel later on when you have these precise measurements. Now, personally, I'm not that sure about that, because if you don't know the shoe size, you probably don't know how many stitches you need to cast on in the first place. So I am not sure how viable that is. But sometimes you do know how many stitches you cast on, but you don't know their shoe size anymore. So for these cases, I think an Afterthought heel is very nice. Personally, I'd say that the Afterthought heel here is a design choice foremost, because few other heels I'm aware of can continue the pattern in this direction. So it's a wonderful choice for self-striping yarn or intense colorways, but also cases like these, stripes, cables, whatever, where you want to continue the pattern into the heel, and you will only have this tiny little band of decreases to interrupt it. So for these cases, the Afterthought heel is just perfect. Anyway, comment below if you have any questions, and as always, happy knitting and enjoy the rest of your day.